Nietzsche's intellectual background and early influences. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most influential philosophers of the 19th century, is often misunderstood as a nihilist. However, to understand his work fully, we must first examine the intellectual currents that shaped his thinking. Before Nietzsche developed his unique philosophy, he was heavily influenced by earlier philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer and Richard Wagner. Schopenhauer, whose pessimistic view of the world deeply resonated with Nietzsche in his early years, argued that life was characterized by suffering caused by a will and irrational, blind force driving all of existence. Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation presented a stark view of human existence, where suffering is inevitable, and the best humans can do is resign themselves to this fate. Nietzsche admired Schopenhauer's concept of suffering as the central aspect of human life. However, Nietzsche would later reject Schopenhauer's conclusions, realizing that this path led only to despair and resignation. Rather than surrendering to suffering, Nietzsche sought to transform it. He famously said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." This maxim became one of the cornerstones of his philosophy. For Nietzsche, suffering could be the catalyst for greatness, not an obstacle to avoid. In fact, Nietzsche's ideas about the potential for human greatness emerged as a response to this very pessimism that Schopenhauer embraced. Nietzsche's will to power replaced Schopenhauer's concept of a resigned will, focusing instead on the individual's drive to assert themselves in a world devoid of meaning. The Industrial Revolution and the loss of traditional values. To understand Nietzsche's critique of nihilism, we must examine the era in which he lived, the 19th century. This was a time of unprecedented change, brought about by the Industrial Revolution, which transformed society at a rapid pace. Traditional values, particularly those upheld by the church and monarchy, began to crumble under the weight of scientific advancements and industrialization. The rise of secularism and individualism meant that the old systems of meaning and morality, often grounded in religion, were losing their power. For centuries, European societies had lived according to the teachings of Christianity, which provided a moral framework and an explanation for human existence. But as scientific discoveries advanced, particularly Darwin's theory of evolution, religious explanations for the origin of life became increasingly difficult to reconcile with the observable world. Nietzsche observed that as these traditional values began to lose their grip on society, a new vacuum of meaning was created. This void, Nietzsche argued, was a kind of spiritual crisis, one that could either lead to a new age of creative potential or plunge humanity into nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning or purpose. The crisis of values, Nietzsche's God is dead. The pivotal moment in Nietzsche's critique of nihilism is his famous declaration that God is dead. Many have misinterpreted this as a mere atheist proclamation, but it is far more profound. In his work The Gay Science, Nietzsche introduces the madman who runs into the marketplace crying out, "Where is God? I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I." Nietzsche's point is that the death of God was not just about the decline of religious belief, but the collapse of the entire moral framework that had sustained European civilization for centuries. The death of God left a profound void in human existence, and Nietzsche believed this void was precisely the birthplace of nihilism. But Nietzsche did not simply mourn the loss of meaning. He saw it as an opportunity. If God is dead, then humans must take responsibility for creating their own meaning. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy diverges from traditional nihilism. While nihilism often leads to despair, Nietzsche believed that the death of God was not the end of meaning, it was merely the beginning of humanity's freedom to create new values. Nihilism, passive versus active nihilism. To explore Nietzsche's solution to nihilism, we must first distinguish between two types of nihilism, passive nihilism and active nihilism. Passive nihilism refers to the response of individuals who, in the face of a meaningless world, sink into despair, resignation, and hopelessness. They give up on life and accept that there is no ultimate purpose or meaning. Active nihilism, on the other hand, is the process of destruction and recreation. Nietzsche advocated for this form of nihilism, where the old values are shattered, and new ones are created. Active nihilism, in Nietzsche's view, is a creative force that frees individuals from the constraints of traditional morality and opens up the possibility for personal greatness. This distinction is crucial because Nietzsche's critique of nihilism is not about lamenting the collapse of meaning, but about harnessing the power of becoming. Nietzsche called on humanity to destroy outdated values and affirm life in all its complexity, even its suffering. The Übermensch, Nietzsche's answer to nihilism. In his work Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche presents the idea of the Übermensch, or Overman, as a solution to nihilism. The Übermensch is an individual who transcends traditional morality and creates their own values. Rather than succumb to the void left by the death of God, the Übermensch affirms life and actively shapes their own destiny. The concept of the Übermensch is closely related to Nietzsche's idea of the will to power, the fundamental drive that motivates all human actions. The Übermensch is someone who embraces this will to power and uses it to push beyond conventional boundaries and create a meaningful existence on their own terms. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not bound by social conventions, religious dogmas, or societal expectations. Instead, they live authentically and independently, constantly evolving and becoming. The Übermensch is also an embodiment of Nietzsche's ideal of becoming who you are. This idea stresses the importance of individual self-realization. To become the Übermensch, one must go through trials, confront suffering, and, most importantly, choose to live a life that is uniquely their own. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch not as a distant ideal but as a challenge for individuals to strive toward. The Übermensch in the modern world, application and relevance. Now, we can turn to the relevance of Nietzsche's philosophy in the modern world. In today's society, many of the issues Nietzsche grappled with are still present. We live in a time of tremendous cultural disintegration where traditional values seem to have lost their meaning for many. The decline of religion, consumerism, and the rise of technological determinism all contribute to a sense of emptiness. Nietzsche's diagnosis of nihilism is as relevant today as it was in the 19th century. In modern times, we see the effects of passive nihilism in widespread depression, anxiety, and a sense of lack of purpose. Many people struggle to find meaning in a world that feels disconnected, fragmented, and increasingly commodified. The nihilistic void Nietzsche warned about can be seen in the rise of extreme individualism, political polarization, and the breakdown of social cohesion. However, Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch provides a counterpoint to this despair. It calls for a radical reaffirmation of life. In a world where traditional structures of meaning are collapsing, Nietzsche challenges us to create new values and redefine our relationship with ourselves and the world. The Übermensch is an ideal for those who are willing to confront the absurdity of life and rise above it by creating their own authentic existence. Nietzsche's influence on modern philosophy and culture. Nietzsche's ideas have had a profound influence on modern philosophy, literature, and art. His rejection of traditional morality and his emphasis on the individual as a creator of values have inspired generations of thinkers, artists, and cultural leaders. Figures such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Michel Foucault were influenced by Nietzsche's ideas about power, morality, and the human condition. Nietzsche's philosophy also influenced existentialism, postmodernism, and psychology. His exploration of the will to power has been seen as a precursor to later developments in psychoanalysis, particularly the work of Sigmund Freud. In the world of art, Nietzsche's ideas about the creative potential of the individual were reflected in the works of writers like James Joyce, Franz Kafka, and Thomas Mann. In popular culture, Nietzsche's ideas continue to resonate in a world filled with confusion and uncertainty. His challenge to confront the chaos of existence head-on, to create meaning in a meaningless world, has inspired countless works in film, literature, and music. Conclusion: Nietzsche and the future of humanity. To conclude, Nietzsche was not a nihilist in the conventional sense. Instead, he was a philosopher who confronted nihilism head-on and sought to provide a solution. His philosophy urges us to reject the passive acceptance of meaninglessness and instead embrace the active creation of meaning. The Übermensch is not just a theoretical ideal, it is a call to action. It challenges us to rise above the collapse of old values and take responsibility for creating a new, life-affirming framework for existence. Nietzsche's challenge to humanity remains as urgent as ever. In a world where old systems of meaning are faltering, will we succumb to despair, or will we dare to create new values, rise above nihilism, and become something greater than ourselves? What are your thoughts on Nietzsche's view of nihilism? Do you believe his philosophy can help us find meaning in a world that seems to be losing it? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights into the world of philosophy.